Hey everybody, welcome to episode 16 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Today's guest has been mentioned on this show in multiple episodes. He also was the host of the Go Get Outside Canyoneering video. Today's guest is my good friend, Alden Anderson. He's super active in the canyoneering community. I imagine a lot of people who have come to listen to this episode probably know him or have heard about him through other canyoneers. His girlfriend Mika has told me that he even talks in his sleep about canyons. That is how into canyoneering he is. And yet, oddly, in today's show, we only talk about canyoneering for a few minutes. But never fear, we do discuss canyon boogers, so you don't want to miss out on that deep intellectual conversation. In today's episode, we delve back into the childhood of Alden Anderson. Most of you probably aren't aware of his upbringing. He was communally raised in a religious order and had a childhood experience very different from the rest of us. So that religious order was the Sea Org within Scientology. If you aren't familiar with the Sea Org, it's kind of the inner circle, almost like the clergy of Scientology. They're the people whose lives are dedicated to the religion, who live in and around the ranch and devote their lives entirely to working for Scientology. At 21, Alden left Scientology and decided to venture out into the world and explore it on his own. And he immediately threw himself into the outdoors and adventures, scuba diving, backpacking, rafting, and eventually canyoneering. So at this time, while he's learning to live on his own, become an adult, interact in mainstream society, he's also learning how to be an explorer. So a lot of what we talk about today are all those rookie mistakes that all of us make when we first start venturing into the outdoors. So let's rewind back to the 4th of July earlier this year in Fellhaberhoek Park in Tujunga. Sit back with me and Alden and hear all about how Alden went from a church boy to the heavy hitter canyoneering expert he is today.
Yeah, I'm Alden. I like to do outdoor stuff.
You're really active in the canyoneering community, but you also have dilly-dallied around with any number of other outdoor activities.
Dilly-dallying, a good way to put it.
Yeah. How did you get into those activities? Because I know you didn't grow up doing those things.
You know, I did have a few experiences, limited experiences in the outdoors growing up. I grew up kind of separated from society as like mainstream society in a religion, and I didn't have a lot of contact with, other people and, regular public school and all that because it was kind of separate. My mom did take me to Yosemite when I was a kid. I did go to Colorado for a few weeks when I was like 10. I did go on a backpacking trip for maybe a week or so when I was 7.
That's a very different experience than what your regular day-to-day life was like at that time. Do you have any memories, like any kind of lasting impressions or anything that you had when you went on those trips when you were really young like that?
I was in Colorado. I was 10. It was like nothing I had ever seen before. It was just so pristine. Just being in nature, it just made me happy. It was just like a great, feeling. And, I just love to go and hike, and I love to explore. That was a thing when I was a kid. I love to just like go and check stuff out, a short hike or just whatever. I like to be in nature and like check things out and just like go outside.
Most of the time you weren't doing those things. So when did you decide, all right, let me start doing some of these cool activities as part of my life?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of access to the outdoors. I was on a ranch that was kind of removed from the city. So there were, a lot of things you could do, hiking and stuff around, but we just didn't do that much of it. We worked in the outdoors. We did a lot of manual labor, took care of the fields. We had a bunch of vegetable fields we took care of and weeded and took care of all the grounds and did a bunch of maintenance and hauled rocks. And so that was kind of something that we did that was in the outdoors, but I wouldn't say it was really like outdoor activities. We rarely actually got like a full day off when I was growing up. Saw my mom maybe once a week. I remember the times I did get off. Like one time I went and hiked all day, and that was so, unheard of for people to just like as a kid just like go and hike on your one day off. People usually watched movies. But I went and hiked this peak that we had that was right next to the ranch I was at. It was just kind of always who I was in terms of being into the outdoors, even though I didn't have that much contact with it. As far back as I can remember, I've been interested in doing stuff outdoors.
So eventually you had your coming out where you're like, Mom and Dad, I'm an outdoorsman, and then they cried, and then you left the church.
Like
right?
that song, I'm coming out. Actually, so I left this church when I was 21. One of the driving forces for me leaving was the outdoors. I would always daydream about it when I was working. I never really did much outdoor activities from when maybe I was, late teens till I was 21. Maybe we went to the beach once or twice, but nothing really like hiking or kayaking or diving or canyoneering or climbing or any of these things that I had never really done before. Well, hiking a little bit. When I was 21, there were a number of things that kind of culminated and pushed me to leave the church. The outdoors is one of the things, and it was just too stressful. I was working all day, working sometimes through the night. It got too much. My life wasn't my own. Be getting in trouble a lot for various things. And it took a few years to kind of get me to the point where I could get out of it. Just constantly being hammered down by people and just working too much and not having any kind of personal freedoms to go do things. It was very hard, though, because it was Scientology. My parents raised me in it. You have Scientology, which is the religion, and then you have the kind of like the clergy, or, the people that organize or run Scientology, manage it. They're called the Sea Org, short for the Sea Organization. And that's kind of the governing body of the church. You sign a contract for 1 billion years, and which most people laugh at. But in Scientology, you believe that you're immortal, and their motto is "We come back." In the Sea Org.
Is that really the motto?
Yes, we come back. And, your billion-year contract.
Do they realize that like horror movies would use that kind of slogan?
I never really thought of that angle.
Maybe we should pick something less threatening sounding.
That's like the plague. That's the Sea Org in a nutshell. You pretty much devote your life to it. You're working, day in, day out for this higher cause.
And since you were born into it, it was decided for you that you were going to devote your life to it.
Yes.
And you decided you didn't want to, right?
Yeah. So it's kind of a weird thing. Like my parents were in the Sea Org. They joined the Sea Org maybe when I was like 2 or something around there. So I pretty much grew up in the nursery, and a lot of times I either didn't see my mom or I didn't see my dad because they worked at different, locations, and I think they divorced when I was like 4 or 5. So that was all I knew. If you really, really wanted to, as a kid, I could have like persisted and left. But the thing is, it would cause a really hard time for my parents. It would cause so much trouble for my parents trying to find me somewhere to go, because they've devoted their lives to this religion and they're in the Sea Org, and you kind of, it's just a given. You're just like, you're raised in it, you're joining. And I signed my billion-year contract, I think, when I was 11.
Which you have now broken.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So you should be in prison for breaking your contract.
Yeah, hopefully they don't come out and look for me. That was kind of, that growing up in that's all I knew. So leaving was very hard, as you can imagine, like mentally. But not having these freedoms, and, again, I would always daydream about doing outdoor stuff and just, having fun and living my life as I wanted to live it, which I never really knew. So that kind of all culminated when I was 21 and I left.
I'm sure you had to figure out all the things like where to live, how to make a living.
How to drive, bank account. Yeah, stuff that everyone would, normally know how to do just growing up. How to make a living, yeah. Managing all your funds and living somewhere, and so many things that you don't realize you don't know, or regular people just growing up in the world kind of take for granted. It's just something that you learn or know, even like cultural references and stuff like that, which you look kind of stupid sometimes. like what, you don't know what that is? It's some political thing or just a general thing on the history of the U.S.
Right. I know there's a lot of pop culture things that pop up and you don't have any idea what
and
any of us are talking about.
And still, to this day, I've been gone 10 years, and I don't... Some things people can, say something about, reference some actor or some singer who isn't really popular now, and not that I stay up on pop culture now, but something that is like so mainstream that you would have known it growing up. I'm like, I don't know who that is.
I remember you telling me you like Family Guy, and I was like, how the hell can you like that show? You can't get half of the jokes. You don't know what they're talking about.
Right, and there definitely are jokes that go way over my head, but because I don't understand the cultural references, but there's enough there that I like it.
So while you're figuring out all that stuff, how to be an adult in a society very different than what you grew up in, you also decided, hey, I'm going to start doing some of that outdoor stuff I didn't get to do. What was the first thing that you decided to do? Did you go backpacking?
That's funny. Yeah. I did. I went backpacking. I can't describe...
Everything went right?
I cannot... describe how exhilarated I was and how happy I was now that my life was my own. Imagine your whole life, you're kind of controlled. I mean, I guess technically it's your decision, but it's, kind of in a way made for you growing up. And this is all you know, and kind of everything is decided for you, more or less. You're paid $50 a week. You wear this uniform every day. You have a very strict schedule. You have 30 minutes for lunch. A very regimented lifestyle. Your entire life, as far back as you can remember, literally. And that's not an exaggeration. With very little time off, your whole life, and suddenly you go from that to you can do whatever the hell you want, and that was so freeing for me. I had this strong desire to do all these outdoors things, but I knew nothing about the outdoors, navigating and, backpacking, cotton, wearing the different types of clothes that you're supposed to wear. My first backpacking trip was all cotton. I thought I could boil all my own water, which is disastrous. You know how long it takes for it to cool down, sitting there with your water boiled. Also,
you probably boiled it way longer than you needed to.
Yeah, so rolling boil for 2 minutes. I'm like, yeah, that's not.
First time I went backpacking, I didn't know what the hell I was doing either. I brought sleeping bag I got at Target that I had tied to just a regular backpack. I didn't bring a jacket.
Right.
I had this crappy tent, but I didn't realize, hey, when you go up into the mountains in California at night, it gets cold.
Right.
You can get really cold.
And the 0-degree Target sleeping bag is not a real 0-degree bag.
Yeah, and I don't think this one was a 0-degree bag either.
I think I'd done some day hikes and stuff, but my first real foray into the outdoors, I would say, after leaving, first of all, I had to learn how to drive and all these things so I could actually go and do stuff. I did this backpacking trip. Hilarious now that I look back at it. I see pictures of myself. I was wearing a white cotton t-shirt, cotton cargo pants, shoes I had gotten at Big Five. I found just a stick, this giant stick that probably weighed 4 pounds.
Was it supposed to be your equivalent of a hiking stick or a trekking pole or something?
Exactly.
I'll use a stick like a wizard.
This is what This is what people do when they go out in the outdoors. They carry a stick. It helps you.
Yeah, you could fend off bobcats and bears.
Yeah. So I had this tent. I think the guy who I was staying with at the time was, I think he had an 8-man tent.
Did you carry that? Did you carry one of those enormous tents? Was it a solo trip or did you go with a friend?
Solo.
So you carried an 8-man tent solo.
I think it was 8-man.
It must have been 8 pounds or something.
Dude, at least. And got my, Big Five sleeping bag. And I did buy a backpacking stove, which I still use to this day. This was 10 years ago. It was a Snow Peak stove that, super rugged.
Is it a little canister stove, or is it one of the different?
I actually did have the canister stove. So
you screw it onto a canister?
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of those little isobutane propane canisters. So you screw it on. That being said, I did have a aluminum cook set from Big Five. I don't know if you've ever cooked on anything on that. It'll get hot in one spot.
Yeah, and they also burn.
Yeah, it gets hot in one spot and it burns. So you try to cook anything.
They're terrible. I have some.
Yeah, aluminum
and I still
just
use them,
conduct.
and I don't even know why I have them. I don't use them frequently, but yeah, I have exactly probably the same one you're talking about.
And yeah, they get all dented up, and it's.
Is it the one where the little pot goes into the bigger pot, and then it has?
And it all screws together on that handle that flips out.
Yours is probably better than mine. Then mine doesn't screw together. Mine just jingles and jangles inside a crappy blue bag.
It definitely does that too. Yeah. A local trip to Condor Peak. I don't think it was too hot. It was, I don't know, probably got the 80s during the day. So it was about 20 miles or so. It was supposed to be a shuttle, but I figured, I'll just walk the last like 4 miles on the Angeles Crest Highway back to my car. So I start like later in the day because it's hot. I definitely had a map, but I didn't know where I was going to camp. I figured, I'll just find something. There's bound to be flat spots, and I'll find water. So I'm hiking. It gets dark, and I'm just like, I don't really have a spot to camp, so I'll just keep hiking. I think I had maybe like 2 liters of water or something. You could do this trip in a day. It's a long day. It's like 20 miles or so. But anyways, I'm just hiking, and it actually was, I think, just my enthusiasm for getting outdoors made it an enjoyable trip. But now it would be kind of a misadventure.
I think you've told me about this one before, and if I remember correctly, you said at some point, you're like, well, I guess I should go to sleep.
Yeah.
So you built your tent on the trail or something.
So I'm hiking, and it's dark, and I'm like, the moon came out, and I'm like, it's still, I still can kind of see, this is cool. But at some point, I'm like, I gotta figure out where I'm gonna sleep. And the trail is just like a single track trail, and it's going up, on this kind of a mountainside, so there's not really any flat spots. And I just keep hiking, and then I don't know what time it was, maybe 10 or 11 o'clock. I was like, okay, so in the next like 15 minutes I gotta find a spot. Okay, and actually at that point I had passed this little trickle, a water source. So I was like, I'll just camp here. So I literally actually just laid my sleeping bag on the trail with my pad, because I didn't have space to set up the 8-man tent.
So you carried a huge tent and you didn't use it?
Yeah.
Ever?
No. Yeah. Definitely would not do that now. Learned a lot of lessons over the years.
Didn't you say in the morning some people walked upon you?
Not when I was waking up, no. Later on, I happened to cross people. When I was growing up at the ranch, this ranch that I grew up on, I would always carry like this Leatherman tool on my belt. So I like had a belt with my Leatherman on it, but you don't really like have to have that. All of my outdoor knowledge was probably from a few select trips. I actually had gone backpacking before, but it hadn't been since I was like 10 years old in Colorado. So I had like somewhat of an idea, and for what I lacked in experience, I definitely made up in enthusiasm and wanting to get out. Anyway, I slept on the trail. It was a very restless night. I wish I could say I fended off a bear or a coyote who was licking my face in the morning or something. None of that happened.
You just fended off ignorance.
Yes. So the next day, I was totally fine. I didn't get a great night's sleep. I kept going. One of the things when you do solo trips, I've noticed, is when you see somebody, you want to talk to them. And I've since done a lot longer backpacking trips, and I've come across people, and I think humans are social creatures. So when you're by yourself for too long and you see somebody, you just start like blah, 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 like yapping away. And I've experienced that as a hiker with other people talking, and I can completely relate to that. So I ran across this guy.
Man, I wish they would shut the hell up, and you were that guy. You were the guy they wished would shut up, right?
Right. So I did run across this guy, and I was like chatting him up. I hiked right by this peak, Condor Peak, which is a bit of a hike to get to. Back then, I didn't know about I didn't really have ambitions to peak bag or to summit these peaks. It was just like, I'm going in the outdoors. So on my way down, I had run out of water, and I was really, really thirsty. And I hit this creek. So the things I had to purify water were boiling it or tablets, which on the tablet thing said takes like 4 hours. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. And I think I had like 1 container for water. I got water out of the creek, not really knowing about Giardia or crypto or any of these things, or what should I be worried? This is a pristine, relatively clean stream. So I fill up my pot and boil water, and I put it into my Nalgene, and I set the Nalgene in the water, and I try to drink it, but drinking hot water on a hot day when you're thirsty is just like not that great. So I was sitting there trying to like cool it down, and finally it cooled down, but I only boiled like half the bottle worth of water. Anyways, it was a disaster, and I ended up being really thirsty later. I got back down to the road, and I still had like 4 miles to go, but it was dark by now. I ran out of water, and I was so thirsty, and I thought, I'll hitchhike. My only experience with hitchhiking was when I was a kid in Colorado, and people pick you up all the time. I mean, this is back in '93 in Colorado. But now it's, 2005 in LA. People don't generally pick you up when you hitchhike.
Especially if you look nasty and you have a
backpack at night. So I'm like walking back on the road. I stick my thumb out for like 10 minutes. People are just like staring at me. I think one van full of people were like laughing at me. I was like, screw this. I'm walking back to my car. And lo and behold, there's a unopened bottle of water on the side of the road, like still sealed and everything. That was like mana.
So that was your trail angel.
Yes.
Here's a funny little stupid thing I used to do when I first started doing this stuff. I bought one of those Boda bags. You know, Boda bags are those little wine skins.
That look like
before I had
the Davy Crockett.
Yeah, before I had the sense to buy a Camelback, I was like,
right.
I don't even know if it would carry a liter of water. Oh yeah, this is cool. It's like in movies. So I bought that stupid thing
from Big Five, probably.
It was either Big Five or Sports LA. I know I've seen them since then.
You're probably not gonna be able to get a sponsorship from Big Five after that.
No man, Big Five sold me some $5 or $10 brain pants a long time ago that lasted me many canyons and protected many pairs of pants.
Kept them very dry, I'm sure, and were very rugged.
They kept them from getting entirely torn to pieces.
Yes.
So there was that, at least. So even though you had this disastrous trip out there, you still thought, oh, this is fun.
Yeah.
Do this some more.
Totally. I didn't know a lot of people who wanted to do that. I moved out here from Florida. When I was in the Sea Org, I was in Florida. It's kind of like their headquarters for, delivering to the parishioners. So I came from Florida to LA, and I didn't really know that many people. And the people that I did know generally weren't really into the outdoors. I had one good friend who was. Actually, one other one was in Washington. One, my buddy Kerry, was here in LA. But at this time, he wasn't around. So I remember that winter I did like a road trip, and that was just the most amazing thing. I was by myself, but I drove out to Utah, and so funny things I did then I wouldn't even think of. I slept in my car seat, in the middle of the snow in Arches National Park or Bryce. It was you're up at 8,000 feet and there's snow everywhere, and I'm sitting at one of the lookouts just by myself in my car. Oh, that's pretty cool. A lizard just came up to say hi. Pretty friendly.
Yeah, Alden just made a lizard friend.
Made a connection.
This lizard basically came up right next to him and hung out for a little while and ran off.
What I wanted to do is just kind of try everything I never got to try growing up. I got a pair of snowshoes. They were cheap and subpar. Everything I bought that had to do with the outdoors was generally not like a high-end model, of course.
Big Five.
That was I should have bought stock in Big Five.
I bought a lot of stuff from Big Five early on as well.
When you don't know better.
And I don't use any of it now because it was all crap.
Oh, totally.
Big Five, support this podcast.
When you're starting out, Big Five is a great place to go. So I had snowshoes. I eventually bought a kayak, 17-foot ocean kayak. I got certified.
I don't think you have that anymore, do you?
No, it's when you're moving in LA. Did
you just sell it, or did you stick it in somebody's yard, or what?
Sold it and all my kayaking gear, or most of it. So hard to transport. So I tried the kayaking, snowshoeing, learned how to snowboard. I got certified to do scuba. Got rock climbing gear and got a rock climbing rope and shoes, and did some of that. So I was kind of just seeing what outdoor activities I would like. I liked it all, whatever. I just wanted to try it all and see what I liked.
And you'd periodically do dumb things, right? Didn't you say you took some little crappy raft down Kings River or something? At some point?
One of the many. I had a Kmart raft. We took it down the North Fork of the Kings River. I think it was the North Fork. Anyway, one of the forks of the Kings River. 3 of us tried to pile into this little Kmart raft, and we kept getting flipped over in these rapids, class 3 rapids.
Did you at least have the sense to have a life vest
yes,
or PFD or anything?
We had life vests. I think I actually even had we had helmets.
Did you know the lawn chair when you fall into rapids and you assume the lawn chair position and float feet first? Did you know that?
Yes.
Okay, so
I knew just enough to get me in trouble and not die. So we kept falling out, kept flipping and falling out, and then one of my buddies, Bobby, ended up bailing and basically scrambling up the side of the cliff or the mountain there back to the road, and luckily there was a road that kind of parallels the creek, and he got out. And then as we were going down, there was a couple other friends were in this other raft that had more of a wood bottom. It had slats in it, and it hit this rapid and went up high and landed on top of this big branch and just ripped the entire bottom out, and everyone just fell out the bottom into this rapid. Yeah, my girlfriend at the time, she sprained her ankle, and as she washed down the river, I went and helped her out, and it was It was a bit of a mishap.
Yeah, I noticed you don't do a lot of rafting these days, so either that didn't leave the best impression or you just moved along.
Yeah, rafting, I know it's fun. I like the exploratory aspect of canyoneering and backpacking more. Rafting, you can definitely explore things, but yeah, just, like hiking, backpacking, mountaineering, and canyoneering more.
So canyoneering's kind of your big thing now. As a matter of fact, I've called you an addict a lot of times, because at certain points in your life since I've known you, you do like 5 canyons a week or so. on
a good week.
Right.
Well, I'm working.
Right. So
that was last summer, yeah.
I know that you also like to do first descents and explore new canyons and sometimes ditches.
Well, unfortunately, here in LA, we have, some people like to say they aren't great canyons, which is what we have. There are a lot of good canyons out there, but a lot of the main branches of rivers or creeks or drainages that have rappels and would be good canyoneering routes have mostly been descended. So a lot of the ones we're going down are kind of harder to get to or don't look as great on the map.
Full of brush and bushwhacking.
Dude, hashtag freaking PO appreciation.
Yeah, and full of poison oak.
Yes, poison oak. The thing that kind of drew me to canyoneering that I didn't really feel in rock climbing. So I tried rock climbing, did top rope, and it's kind of cool, but I like moving through the landscape. I've realized this over the years, like what is it about, these different activities that I like over other outdoor activities. Canyoneering, for me, it's exploring. And it requires some technical gear and knowledge, so not everybody can just go out and do it. So there's less people. You're exploring areas where very, very few people will go. And you could, potentially be the first person in that area, in the canyon, because you have to rappel to get to some of these canyons. It's technical canyoneering. You need all kinds of, webbing and little rapid links or little chain links that screw together. So you need a lot of gear, so it requires some extra knowledge, and you're in the outdoors and you're exploring these places, which is pretty awesome. And there's so many unique things in canyons, so many carved, rock sculptings in certain ways and stuff like that. That's just is pretty unique.
So now we have to talk about how you got into canyoneering, because I know that you've told me that much like everything else you got into, you kind of stupidly jumped into this one too.
I think backcountry, or somebody was having a sale on 10.5 millimeter PMI rope,
which is the same mistake I made. I bought 11 mil PMI rope because it was the only static rope I could find. For those that don't know, 11 mil rope, 10.5 mil rope is extremely heavy
and very thick,
bulky,
yes,
and very thick and very friction full. I don't know.
Yeah,
generates a lot of
through your
friction.
Devices. I think the first canyon I did was left fork of Fusier, or as I like to call it, Fusier. But I'm sure that's an absolute mispronunciation.
Yeah, he and I have argued about the name of this canyon before and how to pronounce it.
I think I ran across Chris Brennan's site somehow, and Chris Brennan was kind of the pioneer canyoneer for the LA area. And he wrote up a bunch of beta. That's what we call just the information on the routes, beta. So I picked an easy one that seemed pretty straightforward. I think it had 2 rappels up to 50 feet. Got a bunch of webbing, and I think I had just looked it up online. I definitely do not recommend starting canyoneering like this.
It's a lot easier now though, because there are lots of different people that teach canyoneering courses, and there are lots of different outfitters that offer it. It's not like when you were trying to get into it, and when I first tried to get into it, where there just wasn't a lot of knowledge available.
Exactly. And I didn't even think about taking a class. I don't know, just my mentality wasn't I should go take a class. It eventually changed into that, and I did take classes. But starting out, I was just let's go do this awesome thing and see if I like it. We did a relatively straightforward canyon, but no rope bags. You're coiling a 10.5 mil giant rope, and I had done some rock climbing, so I was somewhat familiar with a little bit of rope management, just in terms of coiling and deploying. And I had a bike helmet and ATC, which is a climbing belay device,
which is also what I used to use in the early days before I found out about piranhas,
double stranding everything.
Yeah.
So now when I see somebody that has an ATC and double stranding everything, I'm oh, they're noobs. Because that's what I did when I was
You're
a noob.
who's this idiot? Who invited this moron? I would never hang out with a person
Totally.
that does this now.
It's funny when I see people doing that. I'm like, oh my god, they're so inexperienced. And then I'm like, well, that's what I did when I first started. So then I can relate. So I try to tell myself that you just need to learn some of the refined techniques. After that, I just kept going canyoneering and learned more about backpacking and started doing that.
I know you also like diving. You do a little bit of mountaineering. Tried out ice climbing.
Diving, yeah. Actually, I did that relatively soon after I left the church. I think it was like 2006, so maybe a year and a half or 2 years after I left. My buddy Shane and I were doing a 3-week or 2.5-week trip in kind of southern Mexico. We just rented a car and we were driving around, going off into the jungle, just like finding a spot. Actually, when we got to Belize, we just like drove into the middle of the sugarcane field and parked and set up our tent and camped. We almost got arrested the next day for not having insurance. And we told them we were in the sugarcane field, and they were like, dude, you guys are crazy. This is the cops in Belize. Like, you guys are crazy, man. That's where all the drug deals go down. We were just like, didn't have a clue. Traveling, camping, wherever. One time in Mexico, we were driving on this like road at night, just, literally just driving down the highway. We'd see a side road and just turn off and just drive down until we figured we were far enough away and camped. And one night we were driving through the jungle down there and came across all these dudes with like automatic weapons, and we just turned around and hightailed it out of there. We didn't know what, military or like guerrillas, or I didn't know what it was. So in all likelihood it was probably military, but there was no signs or anything. I don't know. We just turned around and left. Anyway, so I got certified diving down there, and it was interesting. It's completely different than anything else I've experienced. The first time I went down, we went down, maybe like 5 or 10 feet, and it was like, okay, whatever. Didn't do any pool dives. It was all done in the ocean. And then we went down like 60, 70 feet just right away. And at first, I had this like panic. And I've had this with other things too in the outdoors. I don't panic, but you can feel like that panic feeling coming, and you have to keep it in check, otherwise you'll panic and get out of control. So one of the things you can do, figured out for myself, is just kind of like look around and look at interesting things, kind of get rid of that inward panic feeling. So I was just down there, and you see all the fish swimming around you, and it feels like you're in a totally alien environment. And these fish can just like whiz right by you and just like swimming super fast, darting around you, and you're this big clunky like astronaut underwater.
It's definitely the closest thing I think you can probably get to
like being in space,
feeling like you're in some
yeah.
sort of foreign outer space world. Yeah.
Absolutely,
because everything down there functions very differently than what we're accustomed to up here.
Yeah, and it's a totally different environment. Everything has evolved underwater. I guess everything came from the water, but the laws are all different. Things are floating and like moving around. Usually on land, you can run, fast. You can run away from something or, beat something away. But underwater, you're like all your movements are slow and, cumbersome and bulky.
And you have to think in 3 dimensions in a way that you don't have to on the surface.
Right. Yeah. Looking down and to the side and up. It's pretty bizarre. And I think, everybody should, if they can swim and, aren't afraid of that, they should definitely try it. It's a very interesting feeling and an interesting sport.
So I'm going to change the topic a little bit to something we were talking about earlier today. You were telling me about how years back you had an expensive car and you got a nice apartment and you just worked all the time, and then you realized you weren't very happy with that.
Yeah, definitely went through that period in my life, maybe like early 20s to mid 20s. Like I've said before, when I was in the Sea Org, like everything is planned for you. You're not thinking about getting a job. You're not thinking about trying to find a place to live or retirement. Everything is taken care of for you. So literally, it just doesn't even cross your mind. I got into photography at a young age, maybe when I was 12, so I figured, I'll just do photography for the church, for Scientology. In the Sea Org, kind of everything is already planned out for you, more or less, and your destiny is not really your own. So after I left, you kind of have to learn all these things on your own, money and finances. Until I was 21, I never really could afford very much because you're getting $50 a week. Granted, everything is taken care of. Most, your food for the most part, you can buy stuff in the local canteen. Your uniform or whatever is given to you. Your, berthing where you live is taken care of. You don't have to pay for any of these things. You generally don't need a car. I didn't have a car. Some people did, but I didn't have a car, so I couldn't just go out and just like buy stuff. So that was one of the things that I did, in addition to exploring the outdoors and exploring all these activities, is go out and buy stuff. And, you know, over the years, it started to pile up. You know, I always wanted to have like a good car, so I bought like a really nice like 4-wheel drive car. It was like 30 grand. And that was on top of another new car that I had bought a few years earlier, which I hadn't fully paid for. So they basically took like the balance of that car and put it on the 4-wheel drive. So my payment was like $500 a month, or $550 a month for the car, and then another $150 for insurance. And then I had like a pretty nice apartment, and I would just like buy stuff that I wanted, and I worked all the time. And
so you tried being a consumer.
Exactly. I did save money, believe it or not, when I was growing up in the church. We did get some bonuses around Christmas, you know. I think a couple $100, maybe $300, $400 max over the course of December, which was like big money. And I was decent at saving, but when I started making money, I started buying all this stuff. And then I just realized that I was working all the time. I even had to work weekends sometimes. I had a nice car and a nice apartment and stuff. It wasn't fulfilling. I couldn't do a lot of outdoor activities because I didn't really want to take trips away from work, you know, because then I wouldn't be working and couldn't pay the bills. And I kind of felt a little bit trapped and kind of going into this area that I didn't want to go into. I realized that was happening, and I was getting debt, working almost paycheck to paycheck. So I was like, screw that. You know, I got rid of my car, got a cheaper apartment, and kind of like just downsized, sold stuff, and downsized the lot to a point where I can afford to just, you know, take 3 months off work and not worry about bills. I mean, I don't really have many bills anymore, you know, and I have resources and money saved. And, you know, it's funny, it's something I could relate to. One of the dudes in the Zach Brown band, I think it was Zach Brown, he did mention that in one video I saw, like, the best thing you can do is get rid of all your debt, because then you can, you know, be free to pursue what you want. Yeah, it's something that something I changed in my life so I could do what I want and not be stressed about things.
I have no idea who Zach Brown is.
He's country, yeah. He's not pop country. Anyway.
Even though Alden lives in Los Angeles, he doesn't understand that most people around here aren't interested in country music.
I don't know, man. Country music is pretty big.
He took his girlfriend line dancing. What did Mika do? She looked at you like, what the hell are we doing here?
I actually can't really line dance. It was just the country bars are, you know, more upbeat, live band, you know, line dancing. It's fun.
That's fine. I'm not judging you. I just think it's funny how you threw around Zach Brown. Like anyone knows what you're talking about.
I just assumed that you knew who he was. Totally random reference, but it was on point to what I was talking about.
It was definitely on point. All right, so you changed your life so that now you can screw around all the time.
Gotta live it, man. and there's this may be a cliched saying, but it's like, it's so true, and I tell people this. You work so that you can live. You don't live so that you can work. Too many people get into their jobs and that is their life. Their life is their job. And if you have an amazing job or you're saving babies, that's fine. That should be making you resources so that you can live the rest of your life how you want to. And when you have debt and have all these things that you're paying for, you're trapped. Like, you have a car, you get a really nice car that can take you to work so that you can work and pay for that car and pay for the house that you go home to recharge so that you can work. You're living so that you can work. It's backwards. You should be working so that you can live your life. And that's what I try to do.
And you try to do at least 5 canyons every week.
If I can squeeze them in. Yeah, there was one point in this job I was doing, my boss was really like pretty lenient. It was really awesome. He knew I was canyoneering. I wasn't like, oh, I'm feeling sick, I'm going to come in later. So sometimes I would come in a little bit later. I would tell him, hey, I'm going to come in later tomorrow. So I'd run a canyon in the morning before I went to work. And then
you'd show up covered in mud and sweat.
With my harness on, jingling.
Oh, I was really sick this morning.
Yeah. So yeah, before work or after work, I got really into doing night canyons. It's pretty cool. You just get a good headlamp. And
this is something moderately related that doesn't come up, I don't think, too often when people think about things like canyoneering. People get into canyoneering, they're going to be, at least for me, I'm assuming you probably have the same issue, they're going to become accustomed to strange things coming out of their nose after the canyons. Do you have that? You finish a canyon, you blow your nose, and you're like, what the hell is all this dirt and crap that's in my nose?
Or you're in a wet canyon and you're breathing out like on a jump into water. You think about it, you're like kind of blowing your nose in the water. So You get out of the water and you have like snot on your face.
Yeah, so if you want to have nasty things coming out of your nose or going into your nose, canyoneering is for you.
Yes, that is a thing that I never really put that much thought into. But now that you bring it up, I don't know that's a selling point though.
And sometimes it's like I blow my nose and I look at the tissue and it's just dirt. There's like nothing else in there but dirt.
Well, that's what boogers are, right? It's kind of like dirt and stuff in the air.
Yeah, well, this is pure dirt.
Yeah.
So on that note, let's go ahead and wrap this up. I know you have a website. Do you want to steer people to your website?
I didn't even tell you about the time I got rescued in a...
Oh, wait, yeah, we should talk about that. Let's talk about that. No, let's go into that. Because I know that you had to get rescued in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
And kind of going along with what I was saying before of, being able to travel or to get my life to a point where I wasn't stressed. I was on a shoot in Canada for a few months, and when the shoot finished, my boss at the time, super awesome guy, Paul, he got it so that my flight was delayed by a month, and we were in Nova Scotia. Beautiful area. So I got a ride on this big semi up to Newfoundland. It's the island. It's a giant island north of Nova Scotia. It's really wild, really rough weather, a lot of moose and, just wild. So I went up there and I had this idea. I wanted to do this trek called the Long Range Traverse, 7 days. I was going to do it solo. It's really wild up there.
Because all the best things in your life that have happened to you seem to happen when you go solo.
Yeah, when you learn the most, you can have that introspection. Anyways, total adventure. I got up there and there's this guy, I took a ride in this guy's big, 18-wheeler. He dropped me off at 3 a.m. at a gas station. I set up my tent in the lot next to the gas station and got up in the morning and met this other guy, super awesome guy from couch surfing, Robert. And, we had breakfast and then he took me basically to this national park. Grossmore National Park in Newfoundland, and there's no trails. There's used trails, but there's no actual trail system. So you have to take a whole nav test. Then they give you this little beacon thing. It's not a beacon that you can activate, but it's something they can locate you by. I go out there, and the first night I'm out there, I come face to face with a moose, probably 10 to 12 feet away from me, just staring at me. Amazing experience. I didn't know that much about moose at the time, but I think that might be kind of a dangerous place to be.
They're huge, right?
Yeah.
I've never seen one in reality.
Yeah, it's probably 7 or 8 feet tall, with the head raised. They had a campsite, and it actually had a table in it. It's one that you have to hike into, but there was a table there. So I stood up on the table, so I was kind of just a bit higher than the moose, looking at it, or kind of on its level, maybe just a little bit higher. And I actually got some pictures of it. It's pretty cool, just this moose staring at me. It was at night. And I have a feeling he was kind of attracted by the flash, maybe. It was this thing flashing. So the next day I get up early and go up onto this area. It's this big plateau that's very hilly, very, very wet. Just everything is wet, just boggy. You see a herd of caribou. I felt like Into the Wild, when that dude goes into Alaska and it's just seeing all this wildlife and he's by himself. That's exactly how I felt.
Except you didn't poison yourself and die.
He kind of starved to death.
It's debated, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The Long Range Traverse usually starts from the north and goes south. And it's you spend 4 days on it, maybe 4 or 5 days. And the boat, though, that takes you across the lake to get to the northern route was not running. So I was thinking about trying to yo-yo it, essentially hiking out and back. So I was moving really fast that day. There's nobody else out there, nobody. You're on this plateau, you look down, and these giant gorges, looks like Yosemite. Just these giant granite gorges with these big lakes in them. Pristine wilderness, but there's nobody there. I got to the campsite where I had told the rangers I would be camping at that night, but it was still early in the day because I was hiking really fast, so I kept going and got to the next camp spot. It's so wet out there that they actually have these platforms at each campsite. There's no trails there, but they do have campsites that you can aim for. So I set my tent up on this wooden platform they have that kind of raises you off. That night a big storm hit and the winds were clocked down below the plateau at 90 miles per hour, which means that on the plateau they're generally a lot stronger than that. So I don't know how fast it was or how strong the winds were, but they were really, really strong. So I'm sitting in my tent, and my tent is bending so much, it's literally touching my face. There's hail, rain, just like this kind of like wet snow rain that's like blowing so hard. I can't sleep, and I'm terrified that my tent is going to collapse because it's literally like on my face. And I mean, it's usually like a few feet, you have a few feet in the tent when you're laying down, maybe 3 feet, it's above you. But the poles are bending so much that it's hitting you.
I've been in high winds like that where you wake up because the tent smacks you in the face.
Right.
And it keeps getting pressed down on top of you.
So this tent is a semi-freestanding, which means that you have to have it staked out for it to have its structural integrity and keep out wind or rain. In the middle of the night, my tent collapses. One of the guy lines for the stakes like snaps, and the whole side of my tent collapses, and water starts like pouring in. I like jumped out, threw on my rain gear, went outside, like fixed it all up. I'm freaked. I'm by myself. This gnarly storm. I'm worried I'm gonna wake up and freeze to death. I mean, I had a good sleeping bag and I had food and everything. Then I go back in my sleeping bag, and then the other part of the tent breaks. The other bottom part, and water starts coming in, so I jump out, go like secure it all. So then the next day, it's still just the wind and rain has not let up. I'm trying to like walk around outside, and the wind is blowing so hard you can't open your eyes. You have to look down if you're walking into the wind, because it hurts your eyes you just can't open your eyes. You have to look down. It just hurts too much. So I basically go back in my tent, and for like 3 or 4 days it's like this. It actually then starts snowing and snowing and snowing. For like a couple days it's snowing, and my tent is buried. And I'm like buried in the snow. I don't have snowshoes. I have 15-degree sleeping bag, which keeps me warm. And I have enough food. I had enough food for 7 days. I was so damn bored. And I'm looking at this map, like just studying it, like trying to find out any kind of structure that there might be nearby. I had just done this class with the Sierra Club, the Wilderness Travel Course, which taught me how to navigate based on like topo and terrain recognition and stuff, which really helped me. So I was like super bored, and then just not knowing what's going to happen. That night that my tent collapsed, I thought I might die. Now looking back on it, I'm like, it's not that bad. But in the situation, it feels like I'm stranded out there. No one's around. No one can help you. Might freeze to death or something. But after that initial, like the first like day and a half, it just started snowing and the winds died down a little bit. But it was like a lot of like clouds moving through, and I cannot like tell you how boring it was. Imagine sitting in your tent for like 5 days straight. Okay, I had 2 books, Walden, which is particularly appropriate because you're like, the necessities of life. But it's kind of heavy reading. Yeah.
It's not fun time reading.
Right. And then A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson, which is an amazing book and so relatable, and it's just so funny. But I tried to make that last. I would like read a paragraph and then read it again and then read it slowly. So these are the things I did to kind of pass my time.
So who decided you needed rescue, you or the Rangers?
The Rangers. So I was supposed to be out there. I started on Sunday. I was supposed to be back on Saturday. So I was supposed to be out there for 7 days. Saturday afternoon, a week after I had started, finally the sky started clearing up. And I remember this point, I felt so good. The sun came out for like few minutes, and I like stood outside, like took off my shirt, and just like I was so happy the sun came out and the snow was melting. And so then Sunday came around, so now it's the 8th day since I've started by myself, and I've been sitting in my tent for 7 days, just about. Or 6.
Did you still have food, or had you run out? How much food had you brought?
The thing is, I had enough food for a week. When you're sitting in your tent, you don't burn that many calories, so you don't eat as much. It's totally just like a mental thing, and I can relate to people how they're in like solitary confinement. I'm in this beautiful setting. You can imagine being by yourself in that room somewhere. Anyway, so yeah, I had enough food and everything like that. It was good. Water. It was I was camped by a lake. There's lakes everywhere.
And then there was that moose you could have attacked and try to eat.
Looked out my tent one time. There was like a coyote walked by. Now the coyotes there have bred with wolves, so they're like bigger. And he was walking by, and I was like, hey, like yelling at it. It was snowing. I was just like wanting to talk to something.
You just wanted a friend.
He looked over like, what the heck is this crazy bearded dude? I kept going. And then a moose came by once, and then like a duck came and like played in the pond a little bit, hung out with me. Anyway, so on the 8th day, I started hiking out. The snow had melted, but hadn't melted completely, but it had started to melt. And around my tent, it was mostly gone. No, there was definitely still snow around my tent, but it had lowered. Anyway, so I'm going out over this big hill. There's no trails, and I'm trying to route find through terrain that looks completely different.
Right. A lot of the features are probably
based on a map, which you generally look at ponds, the size of ponds, to navigate around, because there's so many of them, because there's not big terrain features. But ponds are like, look different, and they have this really thick brush called Tuckermore that you can't really get through very easily. Anyway, so I'm going up this, and I hit a snowdrift that goes up to my chest, and I probably have 2 full days of this.
How many times did you cry while you were there?
I wasn't going to go into that.
No, did you? Did you ever
no.
kind of freak out or anything?
I definitely freaked out that first night, and it was the second night in the tent, but the first night it was pretty crazy. I was just
mostly you were a man.
Dude, I definitely grew some more hair on my chest, and my voice got a little deeper during that trip. Felt a little bit like Davy Crockett.
All right, so it's 8 days, you're stuck in a snowdrift, and at some point, help comes.
Well, basically I decided, screw this, I'm getting out of here as soon as the weather cleared up, and as soon as the snow melted enough and I could see, because it was literally whiteout almost every day. You can hardly see anything in addition to it being snow. And I know, I've studied all kinds of survival things. You're not supposed to just go wandering out on your own without your gear. So I packed up all my gear, I started heading out, and on the first hill, I'm like, dude, I realized, it hits me, this is going to be freaking hard to get through this snow without snowshoes, in this terrain, without a trail. And then the helicopter comes over, and goes past me, and goes over to my campsite. And it's hovering over there, and my campsite, you can tell, because it's cleared of snow, you can tell someone was there. And they're hovering there, and I happen to have this big red poncho. This is going to be a total great ending for a movie, by the way. So they take out the red poncho, and I'm waving it. They came over. I guess they saw it, and they came over and landed. Once they start a rescue, they have to take you in. So I figured since they were there and stuff. So they landed, and were like, hey, are you Alden? If I wasn't, would you still rescue me? No, I didn't say that, but I heard someone else say that in their survival story, and I wanted to say that.
Are you changing history so you can sound like you were a cooler person than you were?
Really badass, funny guy in the survival.
But what you really said is, yes, please save me, please save me.
Can I get on your helicopter, officer? So I got on the helicopter and got an amazing helicopter tour of Grossmoor National Park. Everything, it looked completely different, Of course, I'm from the air, but everything was white. Those guys were super awesome. I can't, thank them enough. Guys who rescued me, Park Canada, Oh, and I talked to them afterwards. They did the whole debriefing and everything and explained everything that happened. And they're like, oh, there was a ranger cabin less than a mile from where you were, full of food, and you could have broken in there and been staying there. I was like, what? Are you serious? I was like, what the hell? It's not on the map. Usually a structure is a little square or something, but anyways, it's not on the map. So
isn't that usually how it happens, though?
Yeah.
Somebody either gets rescued or dies.
It's right there.
They're a mile away from.
It's I could have been reading Spider-Man comics and eating baked beans inside this warm.
Is that what the Rangers there are known for? Large quantities of Spider-Man comics.
It was just something I made up in my head about how amazing it would have been if I was there. It could have been Spider-Man comics. You never know.
Despite many attempts, you haven't killed yourself yet, so that's good.
Yeah.
So hopefully you got a bunch more stories ahead of you, which brings us to your website that you don't update.
360nomad.org.
Are you going to update this thing?
360nomad.org. Yeah. So I was just in Maui for a couple weeks doing canyoneering, and I've been intending to update that somewhat on there, at least put pictures.
And don't you have a whole bunch of stuff from when you spent a month doing the John Muir Trail?
Yeah. I haven't really posted all of that. And even from Canada, the Newfoundland trip, I haven't really posted that.
Do you need an intern?
Your secretary.
If somebody wants to help him with his website, contact us, and maybe you can be his intern and help him get his website together.
I built it all. It's WordPress. It's not super complicated. Well, it's a WordPress backend, so I did a lot of customization. Anyway, I just got to get around to doing it. Skip a trip or two and update some web stuff.
Today is 4th of July, and this is not when this episode will go live. It's going to be a little while before this episode goes live, so by the time that happens, Alden will have updated 360 Nomad with some new pertinent stories.
Yes.
So if you didn't get enough of him talking about these stories, you can go to that
website. I probably talked for an hour.
You can go to that website and find more. Anything else? Anywhere else you want to direct people?
I mean, hey, if you're not into the outdoors, or if you are, and you want to do more stuff, I would definitely recommend it. Do something, start something that, interests you. I think it really helps people, gets you out and gets you away from all your problems in life and kind of resets you. So I think, getting outside is definitely... Here I go with the get outside one-liners. I'm starting to sound like I did in the video.
Can you quote yourself from the video at some point? What I do, I pick up trash.
Yes.
And a lot of other canyoneers do as well.
Anyway, get outside, bitches. That should be the tagline.
All right, so on that note, let's get out of this park.
All right, let's do it. Ants are crawling all over me.
All right, thank you, dude. So that's just a sampling of the excitement that Alden Anderson has squeezed into the 10 years of his life post-Sea Org. If you want to know more, head on over to gogetoutside.com/podcast. Look at the show notes for this episode 16. You'll see a whole bunch of pictures of Alden doing cool stuff outside. Then there'll be links to his website and blog, 360nomad.org. You can get a link to that Go Get Outside canyoneering video that he hosted that we made last year. Links to Couchsurfing, the Sierra Club, and all the books he mentioned reading during his misadventures. If you want to get in touch with the show, say perhaps you work at Big Five and after the glowing reviews we gave you in this episode, you say, hey, I really would love to sponsor that Go Get Outside podcast. They really make people appreciate what we have to offer here at Big Five. So go ahead and do that. Email us. go@butcherbirdstudios.com. And then you may as well subscribe to the show if you aren't already. If you aren't subscribed to this show right now, head on over to iTunes, Stitcher, whatever platform you like to listen to podcasts on. There should be a subscription button. You push that button and you get to subscribe to this show. And you know what else would be really cool of you? If you'd go ahead and give the show a rating and a review. I'd appreciate that a lot. You can also call us. If you just really want to leave a voicemail for us here at the podcast, you can do that. You can call 818-925-0106. That'll patch you through to our Google voicemail. You can leave a message up to 3 minutes about anything you want. You could sing me a song if you want. If you have a song that you really like, you just really want to share with the world, call us up, 818-925-0106. Sing us that song. Next week, Johnette Stosky. She is the executive director of AOR. That's the Association of Outdoor Recreation and Education. She's one of those lifelong outdoor adventurers who's done a little bit of everything, has every certification you could need. She's been an athlete, she's an open water swimmer, she's an educator, an instructor, and also the survivor of a rappelling accident. Come back next week, Johnette Stosky. See you then.
Woo!